Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we are going to be looking at the weekly metagame breakdown for the historic best of one format. What we're going to look at is the top performing decks of the last week. It's a little bit of a weird week because the data set's going to be kind of truncated between the end of the month results, where people were pushing into top 1200, top 250 Mythic, and then the ladder reset where those Mythic players are now dropped down to Platinum. So it's been about a day since the ladder has since reset. So we're going to focus Diamond and Mythic, kind of try to get both ends of the spectrum there, trying to catch what's been doing well early in the season and kind of the tail end. Platinum, normally, like into the month in Historic, is kind of the Wild West. There's a lot of different decks. People have pet decks, stuff like that. Some are good, some are people enjoy playing the decks. Let's say that way there. So we're going to take a look here. Personally, I got within top 1200. I finished around 900. I peaked around 700s with the Boros Auras deck. That deck's really strong. We'll take a look at the deck list. So getting the data from Untapped. If you want to use Untapped to track your games, deck collection, stuff like that, link is in the video description. And then I will paste all these deck lists so you can copy paste. If you're an achievement hunter and are looking to do the Artisan Historic, basically win 10 games without rares or mythics, there's going to be a deck list at the end of this video that I will paste that can help you achieve that. So it'll meet the conditions of that video. So jumping in terms of popularity, Mono Green Elves is the most popular. People love this Elves deck. It doesn't do well. It doesn't win games. They just really like Elves. I personally wouldn't recommend investing too heavy in it because it's got a lot of rares that only play in that deck. It's very linear. It's do your thing. You don't interact with your opponent at all. If they have interaction or sweepers, you basically die. Boros Auras, 7.5%. The Shifting Woodlands deck at 7%. The Mirror Affinity is at 6%. Notably, in terms of the stats, Mono Blue has been doing better than Dimir, so we're going to be looking at the Mono Blue version. Mono Black mid-range is someone brought over some standard decks. Seems like that's kind of the pile. Bunch of removal. Again, nothing that's too high in terms of win rates. The Wizards deck always kind of showing up. We have Boros Energy that we'll look at, and then Esper Affinity, which is more of a budget deck that people get into the format with as they kind of build towards some of the other Affinity decks. Looking at play rates, it's actually impressive how much Auras has dropped, one time being a third of the matches. It's still kind of seeing a peak here, and usually kind of shoots up when the ladder resets. But looking into it, we have Diamond and Mythic rank, 31,000 games from the last week. The highest win rate deck is 4-color food. This is the Samwise Combo. So this deck is super resilient and can kind of win a number of different ways. So you have just your fair game plan of like Raptor, Johnny, Bombardment, kind of ping them to death that way there. You have card advantage in Goblin Trap Finder and Unlucky Witness. You have the Birthing Ritual that lets you sack these and kind of dig to your other pieces. And then you have an infinite combo. So combination of Samwise Gamgee, Cauldron Familiar, and a sack outlet, Bartholomew or Goblin Bombardment lets you sack the cat. It comes back into play with the food token from Samwise. It generates a new food token, sack it, loop, drain your opponent out that way there. And we actually see in terms of the stats itself, someone got already number 2 Mythic, Zazitza, with the list here. It's very similar. Moving on, we go to Mono Black Combo. So this is, they're calling Mono Black Priest of Gix, but it's the Nightmare Jet Medallion Storm deck. So how this deck works, and you should probably have 4 medallions. It's one of the key cards over something like Grim Tutor. So I'll make that tweak. Or actually, it should be over Serrated Scorpion. You can also use any of kind of like the 2-mana tutors instead of Grim Tutor. The ones that you sack a creature to get the value if you don't want to spend the mythics there, but it's basically Diabolic Intent is the one. There's also Mausoleum Secrets that you can use in place of Grim Tutor. But how the deck basically works, put cards into your graveyard, just general kind of looting effects in terms of like them dying, milling. The next Skull Speaker draws you cards. You ideally want to get Jet Medallion into play. This lowers the cost of your black spells, most particularly Cthulhian Nightmare. With Nightmare, you can basically create a loop where the Freebooter or Shambling Ghast, when you sack it to bring the other one back, creates a treasure which pays for Nightmare, which comes back to your hand for 1 mana. You create that loop of entering the battlefield, dying, entering the battlefield, dying. With Priest of Gix, you can do a similar thing where it nets mana each iteration. And then you have Marionette Apprentice to drain your opponent out of life. So that's one way you can kind of do it there. I did run into a version that's playing like Tendrils of Agony as another condition. You can use the Spy Master's Vault to then help you dig into your combo pieces as well. And then Phyrexian Tower is kind of a ritual in this deck. It helps you get cards into your graveyard. Doubles like the Citrus kind of self-mill effect. And then generates you a whole bunch of mana. There's then the Boros Auras deck. So this one's at 74%. So this is basically the iteration I played, but the change I did that worked out well for me was no Amped Raptor, instead playing Hushbringer. So Hushbringer stops both enter the battlefield effects and death triggers from your opponent's creatures. Or all creatures, but it doesn't really impact your deck because you don't have those types of effects. That works really well against energy. It shuts off affinity, a Johnny dying in ways. So there's a lot of kind of incidental things it shuts off with decks, which is pretty strong. In and of itself too, it is a flying lifelinker, so putting like some of your bigger spells on it was pretty useful as well. In my version, I did find space for one. I think I went. No, I still had the Ruckus. I could take a look at mine, but I was playing one All That Glitters is just another 2-drop to kind of find. But the core of the deck here, you're looking at Spirit Dancer and Light Paws to kind of generate a whole bunch. I was playing mostly on my iPad, so it's like 3-0, but I got to high Mythic with it. Yeah, we got like 851, and then I got up to like 7. So my version, All That Glitters in here. You have all your package. I think I was just down fewer lands in my particular iteration. One less land, but you have Griffsboom, Hammerhand, Sentinel's Eye. Oh, I went 3 Shard Mage Rescue over 4. You usually have the protection effect from Give Reverence, but depends on what you want to do. And if there's a lot more removal in terms of the meta, then the Amped Raptor is better because it's like card advantage. If there's a lot of like creature ETB stuff, then it's better that way there. Then we have 4-color Reanimator. So this deck here is the Persist Combo. So what you're doing, this could win on turn 2. You Otherworldly Gaze, looting. What you want to put into your graveyard is a Scholar ideally, as well as one of these big spells. Emergent, Expropriate, Verdant Rejuvenation, whatever it may be. And then you persist this creature back. It gets to cast one of these, and then you just start chaining together like Breaches, extra turns, Verdant that kind of chains you into more things. You also have Conspiracy Unraveler that can let you collect evidence and kind of win that way there by recasting these big spells. Capricious Hellraiser, another way to kind of cast this one is non-creature, non-land, so you kind of go from that route there. But like Otherworldly Gaze, looting, Assemble the Parts is another way to reanimate. You have Cathartic Reunion to kind of self-mill. You have Taigen Scheming that lets you put cards into your graveyard. So a lot of just ways to kind of sort through your deck and hit those key cards. We then have the Woodlands Combo. So right off the bat, okay, so I'll explain the combo, but I'm going to put in a slightly refined version because this is not the best version of the deck. Winning still, but goes to show the power of the deck, but not necessarily what's in this deck. The core of this deck is you have Shifting Woodlands. With Woodlands, you're able to enable Delirium as early as turn 3 with Malevolent Rumbling and getting kind of lucky with what you flip over. Ideally, what you do is you copy the Omniscience, which should be a 4 of, and then you can cast big stuff. Or alternatively, you have God Pharaoh's Gift in your graveyard, as well as Ulamog. The Woodlands becomes a copy of Gift. Gift then gets Ulamog to haste out. You get the Annihilator trigger right away. You self kind of loot with like Faithless Looting. You have Malevolent Rumbles, Satyr Wayfinder, Cathartic Power could be removal or looting. Vampire's Vengeance is super for aggressive decks, and then Traverse should be a 4 of in this deck. It can help you find, once you have Delirium, it can find your woodlands. It can find you creatures like Atraxa or stuff like that. Toxels win more. It's not really played. Some of the lists will sometimes run Ulamog, Emrakul. You don't necessarily need it. They usually play one Elesh Norn as another sweeper. Sowing Micah's on, not really needed in this list as well. So I'll find a little bit cleaner list when I post it on that. But that's kind of the combo itself. We then have Enchantress. So they're calling it Bant, but it's really Selesnya with the Fae of Wishes as a sideboard piece. With this deck here, you're using just a bunch of enchantments, and you have Sanctum Weaver that can add X mana of any color, where X is the number of enchantments. So this can let you play a whole bunch of enchantments kind of chained together. Sithis draws you cards. Sterling Grove protects your enchantments, and then can tutor. Utopia Sprawl's a ramp effect. Commune helps you dig. Enchantress Presence draws you every time you cast an enchantment, and then you have some effects. So Gauntlets of Light on the Sanctum Weaver can generate infinite mana, 3 mana to untap. So as long as Sanctum Weaver is tapping for net positive in terms of mana, you just tap and tap, generate infinite mana of infinite colors. You have Ghostly Prison as kind of attacks for your opponent attacking, 9 lives in here, with Phyrexian Unlife and Solemnity as the combo. So Solemnity prevents counters going on things. These both kind of circumvent you taking damage in one way or another, so you kind of get around that, so your opponent can't kill you through traditional damage. Spark Rupture in here, so it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Each planeswalker with 1 or more loyalty loses all abilities, and then it basically becomes a creature. There's not too many planeswalkers in here, but this is one way. I think this was a combo with Gideon. You turn it into a creature and then it gets around that. Then you have Approach as a win condition. Overwhelming Splendor shuts off your opponent's abilities. But basically what you're trying to do, get them in a lock, draw a bunch of cards, Fae of Wishes, and then you can do the Approach the Second Sun line. You can also, with generating infinite mana, explosion them. You have the Gideon here that you turn into a creature, and then it gets the emblem, so it's hard for them to kill it that way there. This is more just fun, but you're pretty much going to win through Approach the Second Sun in this deck. We have Jeskai Control. So this is the Proctor Lotus Torpor Orb-esque shut-off ETB effects. So in your mana base, oh, actually, this one doesn't have Lotus, which is interesting. So it's just the shut-off ETB type effects. Sometimes you'll see Lotus in here, but you have Doorkeeper Thrall, as well as Hushbringer and Torpor Orb. This shuts off enter the battlefield style effects. And then that means your Flage just comes into play. You don't have to sacrifice it. Your Null Drifter, you don't have to sacrifice it. Tajik, it's just an indestructible threat. Closes the door really quickly, hard to deal with. Wrath the Skies as a sweeper. You have the energy package. Fragment as cheap removal. Expressive Iteration as card advantage. So sometimes you'll see the Strict Proctor Lotus Field. You'll see Stifle style effects in there. That one's usually a little bit more control oriented, where this one is kind of mid-rangey in that sense. But these effects against like mono green and stuff like that are very strong. We then go to Izzet Wizards at just a shade under 70%. This is the chorus version of the deck. So you have Hymn to Ages as well as Ribald Shanty. Both of these instants have starting intensity. So they have a number that starts with, and then whenever you cast one of these spells, they intensify all your chorus cards in your hand, library, graveyard, in your wallet, in your trade binder. They all get an increased intensity. So this scales. So the first one deals 2 damage, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. You have Hymn to Ages, draws you 1 card, 2 cards, 3 cards, and scales nicely that way. You have Dreadhorde Arcanist that can let you flash them back. Some of these lists sometimes play Snapcaster Mage, Slickshot, your normal wizard package otherwise. Flame of Anor, really super flexible card, and then with Wizard's Lightning as removal. We then have Selesnya Devotion. So this here is basically mono green Devotion with Elesh Norn in the main. What you're doing here is early accelerants, Bird's Paradise, Utopia Sprawl, Fanatic of Ronus, whole bunch of tap on tap effects. Kiora is the main one, or I guess Kiora is the main untap effect, but a bunch of draw effects with Outcaster, Trailblazer, and Kiora. Sharpshooter, just a way to deal with artifacts, enchantments, and then a bunch of 4-power creatures that trigger the Fanatic of Ronas. Iron board, we'll take a look at it in a sec, but this is kind of your main outlay for win condition. Cavalier of Thorns helps you hit your Nykthos, which generates a whole bunch of mana, doubles ETBs, shuts off your opponents, and then Storm the Festival in here. So this sideboard, Graveyard Hate, activated abilities. You have removal and Portable Hole. I like liquid metal coating in this spot, just as another way to blow up lands. 1 ring for card advantage, Mindslaver to take over your opponent's turn. And then you have Cityscape Leveler as removal. Notably with Karn, you can fetch the Mindslaver that's in exile because this looks at cards in exile, which is kind of cool. Cityscape Leveler in here basically blows up one big thing, and then it can attack and then blow up more things. Then Portal to Phyrexia is a nice edict. Really good against Auras. We then have Boros Energy, 64%. So you'll sometimes see Jengantha versions, sometimes see Lurrus versions. Jengantha versions usually have Flage, sometimes the 1 ring. This version here is closer to when Energy first came out. Some of the builds, they were playing more lifelink-oriented versions. So you have Guide of Souls, Soul Warden effects in here, the Leonin Vanguard. These are typically worse, these cards, into the mirrors, because some of the mirrors will play upwards of 4 Goblin Bombardments, and 1 toughness creatures are pretty soft. Now, you have Voice of the Blessed, which gets pretty big in these decks, so this can help break the mirrors, just an invasive big flyer. Also, its Pride goes wide, your Johnny package. Otherwise, this version's on Unstable Amulet as the card advantage engine. We then have mono blue affinity, so this deck can have some crazy turn 1 starts. So 63%. You can play like 4 or 5 spells sometimes in your opener. Seed of the Synod is a way to reduce the artifact count, or its affinity, so it counts as an artifact, reduces the casting cost. Works nicely because it can tap for land and cast for affinity. So you can do stuff like Seed of the Synod on 1, a 0-drop artifact, cast Emery. On turn 1, get that engine going. Tamiyo in this deck's very strong. It attacks, it makes makes artifact tokens that can then help fuel affinity, so you can flip it fairly easily with Thoughtcast or Thought Monitor. Ultimated Tamiyo a number of times. You have Graveyard Hate, you have Ornithopter Foundry combo. Spellbomb's flexible to deal with big creatures or like auras. You kind of reset it that way there. Notably, Giver of Runes can protect from colorless, so keep that in mind. Rebuke as a counter, Sink into Super is like a bounce or counter. Kappa Cannoneer is the big kind of top end. Lets you race, like the Go Wide decks, gives unblockable. You can make it unblockable every turn with Retrofitter Foundry, even if you're kind of out of cards. I personally only play 3. This card has diminishing returns in my opinion, given that it's not affinity, so you still need to tap, and usually when you do it, it's the whole turn. Like, that's your turn kind of thing. What I was playing in mine was down 1 Tamiyo, and playing 2 of the new 3/4 flyer affinity guys. You could play something like that. You could play the 2-drop that makes you Thieving Magpies as well. Whenever 2 artifacts come into play for the turn, that's another card advantage engine. Gives you a different angle of attack. So those are all kind of ideas there. This is a deck I find very polarizing, in the sense I've had very strong streaks. I've won like 10 in a row, and then I can't win for like 10 games. So sometimes it's just one of those, see how it works, and then if it's not working for you, to shelve it and pick up something else in the interim. We then go to Rona Combo, so 58%, or Kethis Combo. I guess Rona Combo as well in a way. Rona is one of the key pieces. A couple things with this. There is a different combo line that you normally see. So you can get rid of the Relic of Legends, as well as assemble a team, or even like Tamiyo in this. And then you play Retraction Helix. So Retraction Helix with the Mox Amber, you do Retraction Helix on Rona. Then Rona basically has the ability to tap it to return non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So you can just keep casting Mox Ambers, generate the mana, untap Rona, bring it back to hand over and over and over again. You generate a whole bunch of mana, you cast Jace for 4, you -4 it, keeping it at 1 loyalty, bounce it back to hand, and then just keep doing that loop to mill your opponent out that way there. You also have Kethis being able to bring cards back from your graveyard. That does a similar loop with chaining together the Mox Ambers. You'd basically mill yourself over a number of times and then kind of combo mill them that way there. Emery can help you find pieces. You have an Earth to get you back your Kethis. Oath of Nissa helps you hit land drops. So you reveal a creature, land, or planeswalker. It's also a legendary that can pitch to Kethis, and then you'll notice a number of the legendary lands which all pitch to Kethis as well. Soul Cauldron can also imprint the abilities, so you can have like any of your creatures become a Rona or a Kethis, stuff like that. We then have Azorius Control. Pretty sure I ran into this person on the ladder and no fun was had. I can guarantee you. Actually, no, the person I was playing Settle the Wreckage. You always attack into Settle and you're like, they'll never have Settle, and then the one time they do, you're traumatized. But this deck here, you'll notice Lotus Field to plays with Strict Proctor. Notably, this version is not playing any Stifle effects. So sometimes you'll see Stifle or Consign to Memory as 2 spells that can counter the Lotus Field trigger in case your Strict Proctor's not around. But it's an Azorius Control that's playing a little bit bigger mana, Fragment Reality as removal, Orin's Chant as a way to kind of time walk your opponent, Archmage Charm predominantly for the counter draw mode, but in a pinch can steal 1-drops, Divine Purge as a sweeper. You have the Days Undoing Narset combo. So Undoing basically shuffles and draws 7, but with Narset your opponent only draws 1. So you lock them that way there. The fairies, you can do it at instant speed at your opponent's turn. Karn board, similar to the mono green list. You'll see the cards at the bottom, very similar overlap. Deluge for card advantage, Verdict is a sweeper. You have Kalim to tap stuff down, Null Drifter, ETB with Strict Proctor is nice, and then you have Commit to Memory. The memory portion with Narset can also lock your opponent. Then lastly, for the Artisan deck. So Artisan is a collection of only commons and uncommons that you can play in the format. So there is a achievement for the achievement hunters. This version here is at 55%. So it is a artifact aggro mono red list. Things like Synthesizer gives you card advantage, and then as an artifact, you have Glint Blast Runner. When you sack an artifact, you give this bigger power. Implement a Combustion is a way to basically cycle itself. You can deal the damage, so that way there. Mishra's Research Desk, Workshop Desk. Card advantage, so Spear is just an aggressive threat. Voldaren Epicure pings and makes a token, and this is where we're getting the value of those artifacts. Improvised Club and Shrapnel Blast both sack artifacts to deal 4 to 5 damage. Static Discharge is another burn effect. Light up the stage for card advantage, Skewer as burn. So that's it for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.